Buying a dental practice is the biggest decision of your career, and selling that dental practice is the second biggest. At Dental Nachos, we have partnered with DDS Match, an awesome sponsor, to bring you responsible information on how to make these decisions with more success and less stress. I would like to welcome my guest today on this show. Please introduce yourself and share with us what you do to help dentists.
Thanks, Paul, and thank you guys so much for allowing me this opportunity to come and talk with you today. I'm excited. My name is Tony Counts with DDS Match, dental practice professional, transition professional. I've been with DDS Match for a little over 6 years in the Kansas City area, and I cover the Kansas City metro area, of course, half of Missouri, the state of Kansas, and Northwest Arkansas. And,
Awesome. Now, I am a dentist. I went to dental school, had to pass all these exams, do state boards, things to be able to do what I do. What qualifies the DDS Match brokers to be practice brokers? What kind of qualifications do you have?
That's a good question. And, some states don't require anything other than, just the fact that you want to be a dental practice professional broker. Some states require a real estate license, which I do have my commercial real estate license, but there's really no requirement. I think the more important question is what type of qualifications and what do you bring to the table that
I like you saying that, Tony. I always tell my wife, I interject, not interrupt, with brilliant ideas. Don't ask her, just take my word for it. Because as someone who's a retired transitions broker, when I started doing it, the person I was working with said, "You're ready. You're a transitions broker." I said, "Wow, that was pretty easy." And why I bring this up is to kind of make dentists aware that the regulations inside of practice brokerage is just wildly different than dentistry, which is important for us to realize because we want to make sure we're working with people now, as you say, the qualities of a good transitions broker. So tell us about that.
Yes, well, not everyone is obviously qualified. They can say that they can help them with their practice transition, but the reality is, do they have the network? Do they have the trusted advisors that they can work with? Can they move the deal across the finish line? Can they handle the complexities of the problems? I had a dentist one time say that he wanted to sell his own practice, that he didn't feel like he needed my services. And I said, "So you don't need a full-time broker?" He said, "No, I'm going to do it myself." I said, "Well, how can you be a full-time dentist and a full-time broker?" And it's very challenging, but it seems like that, a lot of people think that they can do it. But again, the qualifications that you need, and the experience, I think, too. I remember how I got into this space, because I was in the dental industry for over 30 years on the distribution side. And I would have conversations with some of our key accounts about, what's going well, what's your plan, what's your exit strategy. And I just found that there were so many dentists that just planned at that time. They didn't really plan for that time. And that's a recipe for disaster because
I want to bring that to life here. I didn't realize this until I did it, Tony. So I was a practicing dentist, practice owner. I didn't realize how long it really took to transition a practice. So let's say someone's watching this as a seller thinking, "I want to be retired in the next 2.5 years. I can still do this, but I want to." When should they be connecting with someone like you to have their first conversation?
Well, and I can speak to this from experience because I've seen doctors wait too long, and there's not enough runway left to kind of fix things, if you will. Every business, not just dental practices, but every business has things that they should keep doing, they should stop doing, and they should start doing.
That's my team.
You really have to kind of pay attention to what's going on in your practice. It amazed me in the distribution space when I would have a client that was, 6 operatories, 2 hygienists, maybe doing $1 million in collections. And then a mile down the road was another guy with the same style practice, 6 operatories, 2 hygienists, and almost crushing 2.
Yeah.
And I'm thinking to myself, what's the difference? It's not demographics. It's not patient. It's not, sustainability in the community. It's how that business was ran. What did they pay attention to? Did they inspect what they expected?
Love that.
Did they look at the numbers?
I want to share, Tony, you're sharing such great value. in connecting with the DDS match brokers, you have a trusted transition process. And whether it is getting your fitness evaluated, your finances evaluated, your practice evaluated, you're always going to learn something. So talk to me about that for a minute. You talk with dentists selling on a regular basis. When they go through your trusted transition process, do they have some aha moments? That's my favorite club soda, where they say, oh man, I didn't realize my new patients were so great. Or, oh man, I didn't realize I was missing out on this treatment. Do they learn something, even if they're not ready to sell tomorrow, that they can go back and make better in their practice?
I hope they do. That's certainly one of my goals, is to help them in the discovery process, that, what could be good for that buyer could also be good for you at this moment. And there's certainly, again, going back to things that you can start doing. You hate to say
Tony, that with that start doing thing, and just so you know, we're on the same page. I had a coach tell me years ago, start doing, stop doing, that list that people would make. And I just think that's such a valuable list, for people to start, stop, keep doing list. What are some of these starts you might have found with your sellers that they could go back and start doing? There's a couple I have that come to mind, but anything that comes to mind for you that sellers have gone back and done even before they have sold to make their practice more attractive?
Yes, a couple things come to mind. I mean, I like to remind them to start with the end in mind. What does that look like? How does it look like for you to be retired and you not to be working anymore? What are you going to do? How are you going to spend your days? What's going to keep you happy? And I think that's really, really important. And then the next thing is just to try to minimize the noise and find out when they're ready. Because if they're not ready, then they're not going to make any changes.
I have a feeling, Tony, as someone, since I can say this about my people because I'm a dentist, have you ever found that the dentist family might know they're ready sooner than them, or the dentist team might know they're ready sooner than them? Has that ever happened to you?
Oh, for sure. I've had, conversations with doctors and their wives, and then she pulls me to the side and say, get him out of here. You know,
It was funny. I'll tell a quick story. We had a dentist come and do sleep apnea in our practice, and it was the first time ever. And this is like 6 years ago, so it's become even more popular. So a spouse was coming back for the consult, and I saw the other spouse trailing behind. And I go, "What are you doing here?" And she said, "I'm here to make sure that she does it right," because she said she's snoring. So I think that's kind of funny what they pulled you aside and say, you better make sure we do this, right? This isn't in our just, hey, we got to find out about it. I love what you're sharing here. One of the things I can share as a dentist is, you know, evaluating your insurance fees. There's companies that I know you work with and or Dental Nachos works with that can literally get you paid more money for the same procedures. And this is not rocket science, but this will make your practice more valuable. And while on the way to making it more valuable, also makes dentistry a lot more fun to do. The only thing I'd rather instead of that, Tony, is if they remove calories from my favorite nachos, but I don't think they can do that. So thanks for sharing there. Talk to us a little bit about advice for selling to a DSO. It's such a big thing. DSOs are taking over the profession. DSOs are growing. What's the percentage of DSOs? So as a dentist, it can be confusing. So just break it down to us in a simple way. What are some pieces of advice you have for dentists considering selling to a DSO?
yeah, well, certainly the first thing that comes to mind is not all DSOs are created equal. Some are local, some are regional, some are nationwide. And I think it's really critical to understand where you are, first of all, right? Because if your practice is not large enough to entertain the conversation with a DSO, that's a completely different
Tell us
conversation.
about that. I want to stop you because these are educational things. Tell us a little bit of a line. I'm not going to hold you to the exact line, but talk to us about a practice. This would not be a DSO sale. This is a private practice sale, whether it's operatories, whether it's revenue. Tell us about that.
Yeah. I would think anything under $1.5 million in collections, there's a place for that on the private side, and some small DSOs, but your larger DSOs that are paying out higher multiples on EBITDA are looking at larger practices where there's scalability. And so some of these practices that are 6 operatories doing 1.5 and they're at kind of their max capacity without adding days or adding procedures, they're probably not going to be entertained in those conversations, because these DSOs are getting a lot more sophisticated and they're looking at larger practices. And, there's a trend out there that's saying, well, a 2 doctor practice or a 3 doctor practice is much more profitable than the guy trying to do it by himself and taking on all that overhead and all that
And I
madness.
also, Tony, as someone who's been kind of involved in this space for the past decade, working with advisors, selling practices, running my own practices, I think what DSOs are realizing is that it's harder to be profitable than they first thought, and that it's more challenging to navigate these transitions. I'm a football fan, so when the retiring quarterback, retires, the seller, and they have to bring in a dentist to replace them, I think they just realize that that's harder things. And this point, I'm glad you said this, 1.5 million, it's moving up, not down, right? Because maybe 3 years ago, you might have heard 1.2. And this is another thing I want to ask you. I like to live my life in the most, right? So most DSOs, are they going to buy a practice if the seller only wants to stay for a year? If the seller says, I do 2 million, I'm profitable, but I'm out of here in a year, are most DSOs going to say, even though we like the profit, even though we like the EBITDA, we want a longer runway of you being here?
I think most DSOs want that. I mean, I think there's some that are also flexible because I've had those conversations, but that's going to affect the offer. It'll be smaller. If you want to walk away, okay. So now we've got to take the ball and run with it. But you know, if you want a bigger multiple, then you need to have some skin in the game. And that's just, and I think sometimes that's where they lose track of what's happening. They see the dollars, but don't understand what it's going to take to get there.
I agree
And
with
giving up the general's badge, and passing that on and then being told what to do. That's a little bit challenging for some people. So I really try to have a conversation with them. Again, think about the end in mind. You get your money, you put it in the bank, but 2 years down the road, you hate it and you got 3 years left. Are you okay with understanding that? And can you navigate through that? And can
I
you
think, you made me think of something that's such a, I believe, great point as someone who's a dentist. I think when dentists say, they can't stay for the 3 years, it's not physical, it's actually emotional. And I think that they actually come to you not wanting to stay for 3 years, right? And this is great. This is a great, video podcast because we're educating the 40-year-old dentist, the 45-year-old dentist. But what I found is most people who reach out to me, and I would when I was a transitions broker, Tony, I used to ask this question first all the time. I don't know what you think about it, but I would say, hey, Dr. Tony, glad we're talking. If you could wave a magic wand and you could be walking out of your dental practice with the price you want for your practice and the buyer you want, when do you want that to happen? And I heard yesterday many times, right? And I said, you have waited way too long. If it is yet, when I heard, oh, a year and a half from now, I said, oh, this is the right time, right? Like I heard 2 years from now. I don't also want to hear 10 years from now either, right? That could be too soon. So I think that as a dentist, most dentists are not emotionally prepared to
right.
work for someone else. That doesn't mean none, and that doesn't mean DSO transitions cannot be successful. Well, we're going to wrap up here in a few minutes, but before we wrap up, I want to remind people they can text by to 215-543-6454 to connect with the awesome Tony. Text cell to 215-543-6454 to connect with our DDS match team to find out how they can help you transition with more success and less stress. But I kind of think of this like, what do you wish people knew, right, Tony? So I'm a dentist. And
Mhm.
this is actually what I wish people knew. I wish that people knew that when you are above the age of 50 years old, you should be getting your teeth cleaned more than twice a year. As a dentist with many patients over the age of 50, it's not just about the health of your gum and bone. It's about checking the teeth that have large fillings. And that if patients came to the dentist 3 times a year instead of twice, they would spend less money overall and they would find out about problems sooner. So I would like to dispel that myth that you only have to go to the dentist 2 times a year. And I'm putting a fence around it, 50 years old plus. Whether it's a buyer, whether it's a seller, what do you wish someone knew if they just kind of happened on this video at this point?
Great question. And, kind of like that treatment plan that you're talking about, or the discovery for the examination with the patient. I would just wish that they knew that it was okay to talk to a broker, to talk to someone like me, just to find out what the options are. There's no cost, it's complimentary, and it doesn't hurt anyone just to find out what you don't know. And you may not know everything you think you know, particularly about letting go of something that's so important to you.
I,
And we've seen examples, we have stories, we have, good news, bad news, and we can share those and hopefully, at least if nothing else, give them some idea of how they need to move forward. And hopefully they will respect us and trust us enough to allow us to do it.
I love it. It's okay to reach out for a complimentary conversation to find out information about making one of the most important decisions of your career. And by one of the most, the second most important decision of your career, followed by when you bought that practice. Well, thank you for sharing with me, Tony. You're an awesome partner, awesome sponsor. We are proud to be collaborating. Thank you for being here today.
Thank you. And thank you. I really appreciate it.